Welcome. My name is Martin Miles. I'm going to show you the practical hands-on demo about building your first Copilot. This is the practical workshop I showed at my session together with Vasiliy Fomichev at Symposium 2025. Before even building the first Copilot, you have to take certain decisions. First of all, you need to decide about which workflow management system you are going to use. NA10 is probably the most popular and well spread, as well as extremely user-friendly for today. There are other systems like Make.com, SmithOS. You can also use Sitecore Connect from Sitecore ecosystem. And of course, you could be open up to using MCP server. And if you choose MCP server before building something custom, I would recommend you considering existing implementations if there are. For example, currently there are two known MCP servers for Sitecore. One is Marketers MCP, which is official, released by Sitecore. The other is known as Community MCP server with over 100 exposed tools. So if you can achieve your goal by using either of them, well, you don't have to build any custom code. But why on earth you would ever build a custom functionality and custom MCP server in first place? Well, there are different scenarios when using existing MCP server will be very clumsy and time consuming. For example, you have some specific use case which your marketers are often doing. Using traditional MCP servers will break this into a chain of steps. Each of them takes longer times to resolve. In addition, the more steps you take, the more potential for the errors. And if we multiply, for example, for numerous pages, if you want to batch the functionality, then the problem becomes even more severe. And this would be the example I'm going to demonstrate to you today. The second decision is about the system you are going to deal with. Essentially, that could be any system that stores content or data. For example, Sitecore, it can be Salesforce or Content Hub. I'm going to use Sitecore XM Cloud, also known as Sitecore AI, as it was renamed post Symposium 2025. The next choice would be LLM provider. You have a variety of existing systems. Most of them will do the job perfectly, such as Google Gemini or Anthropic. The most popular is OpenAI, but we're going to use Azure AI Foundry. I will explain later why we do so. Finally, we need to define which user interface we are going to use for capturing user in. And that could be any system where users can type desired text. For example, it can be Slack, it can be Microsoft Teams, it can be any system that gathers the user input, and that could be extended. For the sake of this demo, I am choosing Microsoft Teams because I know Microsoft Teams has a rich variety of extensions. At least I know 4 potential extension options. You can use webhooks. For our experiment, we are going to use Microsoft Teams bots. With that in mind, this is what we are going to build now. A user comes to Microsoft Teams, types in the message. Then this message is being tokenized by LLM into MCP server parameters and passed to MCP server. MCP server then executes a specific function, also known as a tool, against remote XM Cloud instance. Once the job has been complete, the results being passed back the chain to LLM. LLM converts these results into a human readable text and returns back to Teams so that user can validate the results of execution. So far, so good. So what would be our business case? Let's take a look. This is Sitecore XM Cloud. As you see, we have multiple cases of incorrect branding. Namely, we have the term Sitecore with the capital C, which is very annoying for Sitecore community. I want to give marketers a tool for the mass content replacement so that they can use a Copilot tool rather than going and do this operation manually or using existing MCP servers, which will be, as I said, time-consuming and error-prone. To address this question, I first need to answer how would I normally do the mass replacement, and the first thing that comes into my mind is using PowerShell extension. Sitecore XM Cloud instance is coming with PowerShell extension, but this one is disabled out of the box, so you need to enable PowerShell first. I have a blog post that explains you how you can exactly achieve that. Going further ahead, I want to say that all the code base and all the samples from this video are publicly available, and I'm sharing them with this video. You can also see the links. Okay, so to do this job, I created the PowerShell extension script that does exactly what I need. It receives the text to find. It also receives the value to replace. Optionally, it can accept the scope under which we want to do the replacement, because in some cases we may operate against hundreds of websites on the single environment. We don't want to spend the effort if we, for example, want to address only single website. This script looks like over 100 lines, but it's very accurate, reliable, it's publicly available here, and it actually does the job. The problem with the script is that you can only apply this script by running PowerShell ISE on the specific instance. We're building Copilot, so we need to apply this script universally across multiple targets rather than a specific environment. How do we do that? Luckily, PowerShell extension comes with a very handful PowerShell extension remoting module, which you can install on your Microsoft Windows machine, and that will allow to execute PowerShell extension script right from the comfort of your local PowerShell console on your host machine. In that case, you will be able to apply this extension script against numerous targets, either local or remote. You will specify that in parameters. So what are these parameters? Let's take a look. Once you install PowerShell remoting module and you enable it for your destination, you will have to provide three parameters. First of all, that is connection URI, which is essentially the host name of XM Cloud instance. In my case, that is local XM Cloud running from containers. The second parameter is a username. That will be a user you create and give it specific permissions, which will execute this script. So the script will get executed in the context of a specific user. And the third parameter is a secret that authorizes that user to do this operation. So I'm flashing my secret. This is one-time occurrence I'm using for my local instance, so I can safely use that. Now let's take a look at the remoting script itself. This is the script you will run on your host machine, and it accepts the same parameters: find text, replace value, scope path, but in addition it also receives consolidated remoting configuration, which will be a combination of the three parameters. All it does, it invokes remote script execution, passing the three parameters: connection, username, and the secret. So the whole script to do is embedded within this script block, and that is exactly that same script I created earlier for the local execution. So now we can execute this script against multiple destinations as we pass them through these parameters. This works from PowerShell window, but how do we execute it from Microsoft Teams? First of all, we need to build MCP server based on this functionality. You don't have to create MCP server from scratch. What I recommend is instead you would go and search for a desired MCP server skeleton with your desired programming language and specific functionality you need. For my particular case, I was searching for Node.js MCP server that executes PowerShell script. As you remember, this script is just a normal PowerShell script. The way MCP server works is it has its own business logic, execution, and it also has a set of functionality wrappers, which are also called tools. We currently have a single tool, which is called search and replace tool. This is the name. It also has a user-friendly text that will show up with the caller. All this tool does, it receives the parameters. We see our familiar find text, replace value, scope path, along with the remote remoting configs because it still needs to know which target to execute against, because that's what being passed to PowerShell remoting script. Basically that's it. This tool, after being called, is sending these parameters to PowerShell extension and waits for the execution. Once complete, it outputs the results. I deployed the whole code base at GitHub by this URL, so that if you want you can go and grab and set it up on your own machine. I also supplied with the comprehensive documentation about the tool, about the way it functions, requirements, and the environmental variables you need to pass into it. There is also a usage example which we are going to use for our demo. Okay, let's set it up. Let's follow this guide and start it. I only need one command, npm start, and that runs my MCP server with this exposed tool as we see it here. At this moment, any vibe coding tool such as Claude Code or Cursor can already connect to this MCP server and execute this tool. But as you remember, we are building Microsoft Teams bot. There are a couple bits missing in between MCP server and Microsoft Teams bot. Typically, users will go into Microsoft Teams and type the human text with what they want to happen. MCP server from its end is expecting to get specific parameters. There is LLM provider missing in between these two dots. Let's go and set it up. Now let's go and set up LLM. As I mentioned, we are going to use Azure AI Foundry. The reason to use it is that you will likely to have Azure subscription already, and having subscription means you are just 2 steps away from having it up and running. So let's go and set up the project. I already have it set up with this name. And once you set up the project, the next thing you need to do is to choose and deploy the model. Once again, I chose GPT-5 Mini and I already deployed. So here I have 2 desired parameters. One is the URL of endpoint and the other is API key. I need these 2 parameters for my Teams bot to be able to talk to MCP server. Okay, now let's talk about Microsoft Teams bot. Typically, you don't build applications against Microsoft Teams. You have the Microsoft Framework emulator. Microsoft provides you with bot framework emulator that functions exactly as the Microsoft Teams. You will be able to send and receive messages. It also has the debugging output window, which provides you with helpful information. In addition, you don't need to build the bot from scratch. Microsoft provides official bot builder samples. You can choose any widespread language and any different functionality of the bot. In my particular case, I pick up Node.js JavaScript with EchoBot that simply receives the message and sends it back. The basic most bot functionality. Once clone it to the local drive, I once again don't have to write the whole code by myself. In 2025 we're using vibe coding, so I managed to vibe code my desired functionality in just a couple of minutes. So the result is published into this GitHub repository. Essentially what we have built is Microsoft Teams bot, which is MCP client, and it also has integration with LLM in order to convert what bot receives from a user and passes it to MCP server, and the same reverse operation. Similarly to MCP server, this repository is very much descriptive. It explains how to use, how to run. It also provides environmental variables which you need to make it work with actual teams after you configure Microsoft Entra ID. The other important parameter is OpenAI key, which you get from the previous step, and other instructions which you need to run the bot. Let's go to the code base and run this bot as well. Is up and running. It also is capable of seeing MCP server along with the expose tool, so it's time to play. In order to test, I open bot framework emulator and I'm going to connect to this bot. As you see in the output, it's listening on the local host 3978, and this is exactly where I'm going to connect. 3978 API messages, Once I click connect, the bot sends me welcome message, which means it's up and running and now is capable of accepting the commands. Let's type the first command, and it would be replace all field values Sitecore capital C to the proper spelling of Sitecore under Sitecore content zoned site collection. And let's hit run. In the background you see bot received the request, it connected to MCP server, LLM did its job, and it already received the results. These were the items affected, and it responded me with a message. So this search and replacement of text Sitecore capital C to the proper value of Sitecore has been completed successfully. So there were total 200 of items scanned. It hit 30 items with 73 matches. The total time of execution was 2 seconds. And the last message is actually the most important verdict of the whole exercise. Because if I was doing the same operation using existing MCP servers, the whole chain of tools multiplied by the number of the page would make it last for the minutes. Since I want to give my marketers this precise specific tool to do mass replacement, and I build it in a shape of a custom MCP tool, this takes only a couple seconds for the execution. I hope you liked this demonstration. All the source code is available at GitHub and in my blog post. Thanks for watching.